Today on Locked On Red Wings, ranking the teams in the Western Conference.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's also a host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. Today, we're going to give you the other half of the conversation that we had on Wednesday's episode, where we ranked the Eastern Conference teams. Kind of a shakeup. We do this conversation every year, but we're doing it slightly different this year. I'll just re-explain it if you're coming into this one without the knowledge of the last one. We usually try and create and predict where teams will fall in the standings every single year. This year we decided to shake it up, and instead of doing where they'll land in the standings, we separated it by tier and put that team in that specific tier. So there's 5 specific tiers on our tier list that we're using. It is Stanley Cup contenders, divisional spot contenders, wild card contenders, misses playoffs, and tank commander. So that's the rankings as we're going to do them, and we'll get into that in a second. But first, I got to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Also want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Scotty, happy Friday, buddy, first and foremost. Sorry they didn't get the sweep, but they got the series win over the Rockies, so still trending in the right direction.
Yeah, we got a big series this weekend. All eyes forward. Huge series against the Orioles at home this weekend. So, go watch some baseball. It'll be fun.
I'll be there Friday. Today, by the time you guys are listening to this, I'll be there tonight. So I'm hoping that we can at least win that one.
Nice.
Just give me that one. I'll be there for that one.
Okay.
I'm a selfish guy. You should know that by now. Anyways, let's get into it. Our Western Conference rankings. I remember how to share my screen this time, so we're good. Look at that. I'm learning. I'm smart. We do this in reverse order of where they finished in the standings, so it's bottom to top. And if we're going bottom to top, that means that the first team we talk about is the team that got first overall pick this last year in the entry-level draft. That was the San Jose Sharks, who successfully bottomed out and won the Macklin-Celebrini sweepstakes. Scotty, this team is better, but are they good enough to get out of Tank Commander?
Absolutely not. This is I don't even think this is I don't think this is a very long conversation either. This is a team that is in the depths of a rebuild. They have some young, exciting talent. As you said, I agree with you. I think they are better. Maybe they can pull themselves out of being literally the worst team in the NHL. But as far as, is these tiers go, they are still comfortably, going to be in that running for a top 5 pick.
Yeah, I mean, they did have a huge loss, and I do think it's fair that we note, obviously, they traded away Thomas Hertl last year to the Vegas Golden Knights. That's a huge blow to that team. But they did add, obviously, Macklin-Celebrini. It's another year older for William Eklund and guys like Fabian Zetterlund as well, as they continue to kind of climb. They got Jake Wollman, who for San Jose is going to be a very good defenseman. Yeah. Not on an NHL scale, but for what they have, getting Jake Wollman back and giving nothing in return is incredible value. So he's going to be a good add for them. And then they, of course, traded for Yaroslav Askarov of the Nashville Predators system. And I don't know if he starts this year, but I think that he is going to be a very good NHL caliber goalie at some point. But if we're looking at just this year, while I do think they're going to get better just by proxy of it being another year in the rebuild, it's probably just going to be marginally better. And I agree with you that they're still going to be firmly in that tank commander category.
Yep.
Now, next up is the team that was competing with the San Jose Sharks for the number 1 overall pick, Chicago Blackhawks. San Jose had 47 points. The Blackhawks had 52 points. That's a point percentage of .287 and .317. Just absolutely dog water numbers by two teams really, really trying to get as many top picks as they can. This year was the first year of Connor Bedard. Shortened season for him, but this is another team that I don't think is going to leave the tank commander category.
I agree with you. Yeah, I do think they improved, though. I think that they've laid enough foundational pieces there where they are probably going to take a step in the right direction. Like I think breaking the 70-point threshold, ending with I don't know, like a mid-70s point total is something that's somewhat on the table for them. But at the end of the day, that still could be 20 points out of the wild card. So, they still think they're in tank commander, but I do expect them to not be in the running for like a top 3 pick this year.
Yeah, I mean, some of the notable gets that they got this year, not counting, obviously having the second overall pick, but Tyler Bertuzzi, they signed to a 4-year deal.
Yep.
Alec Martinez, they signed to Teravainen. They did get Laurent Brossoit, so that's a huge upgrade to their goaltending situation. And just a lot of what I would consider kind of middle of the pack players. So I agree, like they're kind of insulating Connor Bedard right now with veterans who can play actual NHL level hockey, because this last year, like that was a roster full of guys who just really weren't NHL caliber players, similar to like San Jose. So I think that because they insulated Bedard with, NHL players, they will be better, but I don't think they're going to be nearly good enough to leave the tank commander category.
Yeah, I expect this team to be kind of feisty and kind of annoying. Like they have a guy who is going to be a top, elite end point producer at some point in his career if he's not already close to that. And then they as you said, filled the margins with a lot of, like kind of middle of the road, solid NHL players. They just lack depth still. The bottom half of their team is still just a lot of kind of replacement level players. So I expect them to be frisky and kind of maybe, sneak out, get some upset wins throughout the season. But as a whole, yeah, I still think they're quite a far ways away from the postseason.
Yeah. And I mean, next up, it's another team I don't know if it's going to lead the tank commander category. The Anaheim Ducks, Scotty. They finished with 59 points this last year. And they still got Gibson. I don't know if he's going to be there. Cam Fowler's still there. I don't know if he's going to still be there. I mean, you're a Ducks guy. You can tell me more about it than you can talk more about it than I can.
Yeah, I tried. I sat here when I was doing show prep and did hours of like mental gymnastics to try to justify them leaving the tank commander spot, and I couldn't do it. In good faith, I could not even do it myself as kind of the Ducks slappy here. New jerseys, new logo, all thumbs up from me. But they just really didn't add too much in the offseason, man. Like this was a team that if they do take a step forward, it will be because their young nucleus just naturally progressed forward again, which I do expect to happen a little bit. They have a really young and really talented roster with a lot of, high-end first-round picks kind of littered throughout that team. I expect them to take a step forward. I believe in the core of this team. I think long-term they're headed in a great place. But I also don't see it this year, man. I still think the blue line blows. And I think there's so many questions in net. One being, how long can they keep getting away with we're going to trade Gibson? No, we're not. So, I think that ultimately they still find themselves down there. But I do, it wouldn't shock me if they went, oh, look, the Ducks had like a really good like November or something and had like 1 month out of the year where they kind of put it all together and were really good.
I mean, this is a team, too, that has, like, some fun young pieces, right? Obviously, Troy Terry, he's not, like, young anymore, but 27, he's definitely not old. He's in the prime of his career. He's a fun player to watch. They got Trevor Zegras, who had a little bit of a down year this past year, but still has an incredible amount of talent.
His usage was whack last year.
Mason McTavish can be fun as well. Like, Cutter Gauthier. Like, they got Gauthier? Either way, they got a lot of fun young players, but it's going to be a while, I feel, until they can really put it together and like take that real step forward. So, I mean, their big offseason acquisition outside of Beckett Seneca in the draft was Robbie Fabry from the Red Wings, who's like a middle six forward on a bad team, which is what they are. So I don't see this team really. This is going to be another like developmental year for the youth, and then maybe next offseason, they'll start adding to try and climb their way into like the middle categories.
I agree.
Sick logo though, sick jersey. I'm glad. Like they were skating around in their practice jerseys today. I was like, oh, it looks so freaking good, so good.
Which is such an improvement from them having maybe the worst logo and jerseys in the sport borderline from
yes,
a couple years ago. So
the most boring. They went from the most creative looking jerseys in the league to the most boring looking jerseys in the league, and now obviously nothing's going to replace the plum, right? But I actually think that the orange and the old school logo kind of go hard.
Yeah,
I think the
agree.
all orange logos go.
Like it.
All orange uniforms go pretty hard.
I like it.
Scotty, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to keep this conversation going. We're only 3 teams in to a 16-team conference, and we're one segment in. So even though I feel like I'm talking a mile a minute, we might have to pick up the pace even faster as we continue through this. So stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We're going to continue our Western Conference rankings here. And next up for us, Scotty, if we're going in reverse order, is the Arizona Utah Hockey Club. That was far less funny than I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be funnier than that. I'm leaving it, though.
That was good, man. That was good.
It's not funny unless you laugh. And if you just let me panic, then it goes up the hill. Anyways, this Utah, I think, is one of the more interesting teams on here just simply because they went hard in the paint this offseason. For a team that finished 4th from last in the Western Conference with 77 points, like I think there's a legitimate chance that they might be wild card contenders this year.
Yeah, they're going to be in that conversation, man. I think the margin between wild card contenders and missed playoffs is probably pretty close, right? That's a pretty fine line there. They did go hard. They wanted to kind of have their introduction to Utah be a big splash, and for as little as a lot of people want to give Arizona any credit ever, like they do have a young nucleus that is pretty exciting there too. A lot of draft picks over the last 5 or 6 years as well. A lot of first round draft picks, I should say. So. Like I do expect this team to take a big step forward. I would still have them if I'm mapping out my playoff predictions on the outside looking in. But that doesn't mean they won't be kind of in the lower half of the mix there, heading into the trade deadline or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, right? Like they are a team, and I've always rooted for Arizona. I'm going to root for Utah this year because one, that fan base and the players on those teams deserve it after the craziness that has been the entire existence of the Arizona Coyotes. The Utah Hockey Club, I mean, they made huge acquisitions in getting Mikhail Sergachev as well as John Marino to really bolster their back end. Like that's a huge upgrade to their defensive core. They have good young forwards like Clayton Keller's really good. Like if he didn't play for Arizona, people would be talking about Clayton Keller a heck of a lot more. He's a really good hockey player. Nick Schmaltz isn't bad. Lawson Krause isn't bad. Like they don't have a bad team. Logan Cooley, obviously, another one who's highly, highly talked about. I just agree with you that while I think that they could be in the conversation late in the year, the reality is the team in the Western Conference with the least amount of points to make the playoffs was the Vegas Golden Knights last year with 98 points. Huh. Now, there's nothing saying that 98 points is going to be what it is this year, but that top half of the Western Conference is pretty good. There's a pretty steep drop after Wild Card 2 and the rest of the conference, right? Because Wild Card 2 was 98 points, then it was 92 points, then 87, and so on and so forth. It was a top-heavy conference. So I think Utah is going to scrape out more points and stay relevant. I don't think I agree with you. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they'll be in that conversation, though, later in the year. I think they are a misses playoffs category, but they are headed in the right direction, and I'm rooting for Utah. Also, real quick, what do you think of their uniforms?
They're fine.
So I'm kind of disappointed. They look fine. I agree with you. But when your logo is primarily powder blue, but your uniform is not primarily powder blue, I think that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think
primarily black uniform kind of
I think they'll have some alternates that are a lot more.
They look clean. I just think that it should have been all powder blue.
Sure.
But that's my 2 cents. Not that anyone listening, cares for that. So next up, Scotty, is the Seattle Kraken, a team that made the playoffs in their inaugural season and then missed the next year. 81 points this last season. What do you got with the Kraken, man? I feel like they're a hard read for me.
Yeah, I think they're the hardest read we'll talk about here, to be honest, at least for myself. I'm going to put them in wild card contenders, but I think that I could very easily see a misses playoffs argument as well. The reason why I think they take a little bit more of a step forward again this year is because the nucleus they have is so young. Like if you're looking at the players that they're going to rely on the most, right? Like Beniers obviously is a huge name there. Like it's a young growing team that I think went through some second year growing pains, but I still think is very talented. And I think there's some questions on the back end as well, but I do think that ultimately, I'm not sure if I have them in the playoffs, but I think they'll be in the race for sure.
Yeah, this is one where I might have them. This is really tough. Like if we had like a 0.5 category between those two, like they'd firmly fit in there because they were big spenders in free agency. Remind you, like they got Brandon Montour, they got Chandler Stevenson. I think they overpaid out the nose for Chandler Stevenson, but like still, like both things can be true, right? We talked about this with Boston. Boston overpaid for their free agents, but it is also true that those free agents make the team better immediately. Yeah. So like, and also I don't want to forget, like they committed to Adam Larson as well as Matty Beniers. Like they made big commitments to some of their players who are already on the team, core pieces as well. So I think this is a team that's going to be better next year. I still don't know if it's just going to be better enough to get back into that mix. So I kind of side with you a little bit here, Scotty. New coach too, I believe. Mm-hmm. But I just, given who else is in the conference and what those teams are doing, I struggle to see this team being a wild card team. So far it's been chalk to the first 5 teams. It's been chalk. Take Commanders last year, take Commanders this year.
Right. Like, breaking it down into 5 categories is like, I'm not sure if Seattle and Utah are going to be neck and neck with each other. I think one of those is probably closer to the tier above than the other. But it's I don't know. I think we're about to start getting to where like it hits the fan kind of category where it's going to get really weird.
You say that, but next up is the Calgary Flames, who also had 81 points this last year. And I mean, and this is, I think, part of the reason why so much of this is chalk so far and where we're both agreeing it's chalk is because of the fact that the Western Conference is like so top heavy and the bottom is just like not in the same tier. Mm-hmm. So the Calgary Flames, at one point a few years ago were one of my favorite teams to watch in hockey. Fun, they were so fun. Ever since they made that trade for Jonathan Huberdeau, the team's just been kind of being picked apart. I just really struggle to see a universe, especially now that they don't have Markstrom because they traded him to New Jersey. I struggle to see a universe where this team is a real wild card contender.
Yeah, I think this is still a miss the playoffs for them too. I agree. I don't have too much else to add. I think that they're kind of in a middling point and have been for a year or two.
Like I'm trying to look back over their offseason and see if they signed any real notable players, and they really didn't. Like they got Igor Sharangovich to sign a 5-year deal, 5-year contract extension, which is good. They got Anthony Mantha, but like that's of notable players that I can think about. Right. And if that's the top rung of players you got, then I just struggle to see how that team's going to be any kind of threat to make the wild card. I think there's a real possibility that the 2 teams we've already put in that tier finish above Calgary. Really? You think that they're like a tank commander? No. Team? I don't think. Oh, you mean Seattle and Utah? Level. Yeah. I just mean I think Seattle and Utah. There's a real chance that they finish with a better record than Calgary. Yeah, absolutely. Scotty, let's try to squeeze one more in here before we go to break, so we can at least say we got, well, it's still less than 50%. Anyways, next up, finishing above the Calgary Flames, is the Minnesota Wild. And this is a team a couple years ago I thought was heading in the right direction. I thought they were going to be...
Everyone did. Everybody did. Everybody and their mother did.
And then they finished with 87 points this last year and missed the playoffs. And another team that I just... Part of it's just because they're a Western Conference team, so I see them less. It's a hard team for me to read. Scott, do you have a read on them, Scotty?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about wild card contenders here. This is a team that if, for me, like if they don't contend for the wild card late into the season, it will be painfully, it'll either be A, because of injury, but you could say that about any team, or B, it will be painfully obvious that this core that everybody thought was going to be really good going forward is just not good enough to do that. Like, this is something that everybody has been waiting on and waiting on and waiting on. They had a little bit of a, I guess a decent year in like the bubble, in like the COVID bubble. And then it's kind of been like hit or miss every year since then. They've either had like really good years or a season like last year. But at the end of the day, like if an off year for this team is a mid to high 80s point total, then I'm still pretty comfortable putting them in wild card contenders.
I'll defer to you on that one. I mean, again, they have like some really exciting players. I know they just extended Brock Faber. They did bring in like Jake Middleton, as well as what's the guy's name? I'm escaping me right now. One second, I'll scroll back down to it. Yakov Trenin, like they brought him in as well. They got Matt Boldy, Kirill Kaprizov, like they got pieces to be a threat. I can't get a read on them because last year was such an enigma, but I'll defer to you for wild card contenders on that one. Sure. We're gonna take a quick break. When we return, we'll do the rest of the Western Conference. We have over half of the conference left for segment 3, so stay tuned. This is segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire a great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Indeed you do.
Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, we got to get through the rest of this conference here. So
I think when you do it this way, it's set up to be this, though. Like, again, like similar to the Eastern Conference, the teams at the very top are quick combos. Like, we're not going to spend 5 minutes talking about how the Avalanche are cup contenders, like, or the Oilers, right? Like, they were just there. Like,
right. St. Louis Blues, Scotty, they are, man, these middling teams in the Western Conference, they're hard for me to get a grasp around. I thought the Blues last year were going to be a decent team. I was wrong. I mean, they did finish. They were the last team on the outside looking in, but it was a good 6 points that cleared them from, Stanley Cup playoff contention. What do you think? What do you got thinking?
I don't even know if I can be unbiased in this. I can't stand the St. Louis Blues, so you could put them in missed playoffs, and I'd be fine with it. I like. Genuinely, ever since their cup year, they've just been so impossible to read. Like they took a massive step back. What was that, last year, 2 years ago? And then it's just kind of been this constant question mark of I feel like I sound like a broken record, but like of the amount of time their core is going to continue to last. And like, I don't know. I am not a big fan of the Blues in general, but I also, I don't really trust this team very much at this point. So like, if you told me, hey, they're going to win, they're going to have 86 points and we're going to put them in missed playoffs, I'd be totally fine with it. But if you think they're a little bit closer, because they were the best team to miss the postseason out of the West, I'm fine with contenders too.
And so like, here are the reasons why they could be legitimate playoff threats, wild card contenders, right? Jordan Kyrou, 26. Robert Thomas, 25. Pavel Buchnevich, right, who they just re-upped with, 29 years old. And then they made those 2 huge offer sheet acquisitions from the Edmonton Oilers, which they probably overpaid for both because that's how offer sheets work. But again, it does make your team better, at least in the short term. Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway. Not that it's, I wouldn't even consider signing Ryan Suter at this point in his career any sort of advantage. It was a 1-year deal. Shout out Dog to getting that minimum contract. At least Matthew Joseph is out of the Eastern Conference. He signed with the.
Thank goodness, man.
So, like, if you want to make an argument that they could be a wild card contender, I think you could. I really do, and I think that they will be.
I don't think that's too difficult of an argument either. But
I do think they'll be. I know. I think they will be in that conversation. I think it's fair to say that they are wild card contenders.
Sure.
Might not make the wild card, but they'll be there. They'll be in that conversation at the end of the season. So next up, Scotty, we had our first playoff team of the night, Vegas Golden Knights, who finished 8th in the Western Conference with 98 points. They lost Jonathan Marchessault, but they got at the trade deadline Noah Hanifin and Thomas Hertl, and they extended Hanifin. It was kind of a weirdly down year for the Vegas Golden Knights, but they still made the playoffs. I don't foresee them going anywhere. I could even make an argument. I don't know. I'm trying to look at that Western Conference or that Pacific Division. That Pacific Division's deep. So they'll probably stay. I think they'll be a divisional contender. If we're being realistic, I think they'll be in the fight for a divisional spot. Whether or not they get that or not is up to debate, but I think they're going to contend for a divisional spot.
I completely agree. This is a slam dunk divisional contender for me. Like, this was, they had 98 points, and like they were a wild card, and they were one of the worst teams in the West, worst quote unquote teams in the West to make the postseason. If you change the results of like 3 close games, we're talking about a 103 win team, or a point team rather. You know what I mean? Like I'm very comfortable putting them in divisional contender.
Yeah, and I mean, nobody could have expected what Vancouver did this last year. It was insane. And we'll get to Vancouver when we get to Vancouver, but their team PDO was insane. They were people talked about Detroit's PDO. They maintained it almost the entire season. They came down a little bit and then went back up again. Next up, though, for our conversations here, we have the Los Angeles Kings, a team that I think is kind of slept on. Also rebranded their design, their jersey. Yeah. They lost their goalie Cam Talbot, obviously, to the Detroit Red Wings, but they did make a commitment to Eric Portillo on a 3-year, $2.35 million deal. Outside of that, they signed Quentin Byfield to a 5-year extension as well, which was kind of, the value was good on the money, but the term was weird because it takes him into his UFA years, but doesn't eat a bunch of his UFA years. But we're not here to do, LA Kings radio. We're just going to talk about like whether or not we see them again as divisional threats. And I think that they will be divisional contenders still because they still have a very good team in LA.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is another slam dunk divisional contenders. I mean, I could even see this is still a team that has a lot of young players on its roster. I could even see them, taking a step forward and being closer to a cup contender, but this is also a really loaded conference with a lot of top-heavy teams, so I'm okay with divisional,
Yeah, this Pacific Division in particular is so hard to read, but yeah, I think that they're a talented hockey club, and I think that they'll continue. And like we talk about losing Cam Talbot stinks because he had good numbers in the regular season, but we also argue on here that one of the reasons he had such good numbers is because they allowed the 4th fewest shots against in the league last year. Like, they are a very good possession team. I don't think that's going to change from last year to this year. I think they'll still be in that tier, and I think whatever goalie is behind them is going to benefit from that. So I think divisional contenders is right where they need to be. Next up, Nashville Predators were a surprise team last year. Hey, Scotty? No one expected the Nashville Predators to be good last year. At least I didn't. And again, I was wrong. pretty wrong often, honestly. So the the Nashville Predators obviously got Jonathan Marchessault. They got, I can never pronounce his last name. I don't know how that's pronounced. They got Steven Stamkos, who, despite his age, is still a quality power play specialist capable of putting up 40 goals, put up 40 goals this year. I think that they'll be a divisional contender. Shocker.
Yeah, I'm okay with divisional contender. I think I'm a little more sour on them than most people. I would have them personally, if I was making this by myself, I'd probably put them in wild card rather than divisional. But I also understand that they are a team that's expected to get, a mid or high 90s point total. So like I totally get it. I'm not gonna like fight it or anything, but I will say that I'm a little bit more sour on them. Like they're I don't know. A couple of their really important assets are a little bit older, but they still have obviously a pretty nice roster there. So I'm okay with it if that's where you want to put them.
Well, that's exactly it, though. Like you hit what I was going to mention too is like they are kind of an older core, especially now that they got Jonathan Marchessault and Steven Stamkos. Like those guys are 33 and 34. Gustav Nyquist is 35 years old.
Yeah.
Like they're not a young team, but those guys that I just listed, Nyquist just had a career year. Marchessault is still very good. Steven Stamkos is really good at scoring goals still. Like that's enough to at least have them in that conversation for a divisional spot. If you really wanted to argue wild card like that, also want to keep in mind they have UC Saros, who I believe had a little bit of a down year this past year, but they just re-upped him, and that's the reason why Yaroslav Askarov wanted out.
No issue getting rid of Askarov,
right. Yeah, so I think that just with the goaltending and the scoring combined, that they'll probably be right there. That's why I'm arguing it.
Sure.
All right. Are you getting tired of me saying next up? On deck is the Edmonton Oilers. They made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
Despite finishing fifth in the conference with 104 points. The rest of these teams are all 100-point teams. You got Connor McDavid, you got Leon Draisaitl, you're a cup contender.
Yeah, this is really not that long of a conversation. It's just a matter of how far they can go into the postseason. The regular season, they're absolutely a cup contender, yeah.
Yep, and, as long as you got McDavid and you got Draisaitl, you're in that.
We'll see what happens on the blue line and in net. That's the question with them every year. So.
Yeah, that is. Next up, we got the Colorado Avalanche, 107 points. Everyone knows the Colorado Avalanche. Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar won the Cup in 2022. Scotty, Cup contender?
Yeah, very much so. The only reason 2 years ago that they even like remotely had what you could classify as a hiccup was because they had like one of the worst injury riddled seasons you'll ever see. At full health, they are one of the premier teams in the league. And I expect them to remain there.
Yeah, and they also got Casey Middlestat at the trade deadline too, who had a nice little end of the season with them. Yeah, they traded Bowen Byram. Oh, let's scroll this down. No one wants to see the front of that. So, I mean, they're still the Colorado Avalanche. They didn't have to shake up the boat too much in the offseason because their core is kind of set. I think they're going to be right back in the mix. Vancouver Canucks. This is a team that I think is going to come down. I don't know how far. I think they're still a playoff team. But winning the West like they did, or winning their division like they did last year, I don't think is going to happen again. Their PDO on the season was 102. And if you guys don't know, usually your PDO finishes between a half point below or half point above 100 because it's something that always finds its level. Theirs never did. They were playing so far above their level all season long. Not to say they don't have good pieces, right? Because they do have very good players on that roster. Quinn Hughes obviously leading the charge in that regard. But I want to ask you, because I'm fighting divisional or wild card. What do you think with them? I think if we're talking wild card, they're better than both Minnesota and St. Louis. But I don't know if they're better than LA and Vegas.
Yeah, I think for the sake of what the tier is, they are a divisional contender. Does that guarantee them a divisional spot? No, but they will be in contention for a divisional spot. So I'm still pretty comfortable putting them there. I am lockstep with you on that, though, which is, I don't know, interesting because I feel like a lot of people are really high on them this year. I don't know if I just need to see it like 2 years in a row to believe it, but like I just have a hard time believing that they're going to go from what they were 2 seasons ago to what they were last year, just like permanently and fully sustained. So I still, again, like you said, I don't want to just retread the same tires there. Still a really young, talented roster. They have a lot of good assets and pieces, but I do expect them to take a little bit of a step back.
Yeah. And, step back in this case would be from like first in the division to like third.
Right.
Like that's not, it's,
right.
We talk step back. It's not like they're falling off a cliff.
Right. We're talking like 5 or 6 points maybe.
In terms of like notable gains, like they signed Daniel Sprong. They did sign Jake DeBrusk to a like 5-year deal. Let's see.
They extended Hronek.
They did extend Hronek. Hronek got paid. Dakota Joshua got paid as well. And Tyler Myers got a 3-year deal too. So keeping some of the assets that they had as well as bringing in Jake DeBrusk, I think they're gonna be the same caliber team as they were, just without the luck, I think. And
sure.
By the way, when we put these on here on this tier list, we're not like this isn't first, second, third, fourth. They're just on the same tier. Lastly, or second to last rather, we have the Winnipeg Jets at 110 points. Winnipeg Jets, just like the Vancouver Canucks, are a team that I thought last offseason should have just blown it up and traded Connor Hellebuck to the Detroit Red Wings, let him come home so we could have our goalie. They did not. They doubled down on their roster. They signed Connor Hellebuck to a huge extension, and they had a fantastic year. Are they in the same position again this year?
This is a team that I think it is a lot more sustainable. I trust the back end a lot more than I do Vancouver. I think that they are more well-rounded than Vancouver as well in terms of just the different areas that they can affect the game. I like Winnipeg a lot more, and I honestly wouldn't even have an issue putting them in cup contender.
Really interesting. All right. Yeah. I think with me, I'm not comfortable putting them in cup contender yet, just because they haven't really done anything in the playoffs, and I think that's the main reason I would still kind of keep them in the divisional category. And I know that's not fair, right? That's kind of like sitting on the fence, being like, well, like kind of like I did with Toronto the other day. It's like, yeah, Toronto on paper has a Stanley Cup roster, and I would totally put them there if it weren't for the fact that they have 20 years of failure in the postseason. Winnipeg's kind of similar with me. They're just not a team that I've seen really prove it in the playoffs as of yet. But that being said, that doesn't mean I don't think they're a good hockey team. It doesn't mean I don't think they can win the Stanley Cup. It just means I'm not comfortable putting them in that Stanley Cup contenders tier yet. They have a great roster. They have Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers, who are they
Kyle
trading
Connor
Ehlers?
too, man.
Yeah, we both did.
I wanted them to blow it up, so I wanted Kyle Connor real bad too.
Alex Iafallo, Gabriel Vilardi, of course, as I already mentioned, they got Connor Hellebuck. Like, they got a good team. I think they're going to be in the mix for the division, but I don't know if I can put them in the same tier as the Oilers and the Avalanche.
Which is fair. I guess my mindset was just the same but opposite, right? Like, it was like I think they're comfortably better than everybody in the tier that they are in. So maybe they're just kind of like in that half. You know what I mean?
In between tier,
kind of right in between. Yeah, they'll be a top end division contender.
Right. And then now, lastly, we have the Dallas Stars.
Give me cup contender, baby. They're my cup pick last year. I love the Dallas Stars. I love Adi. I love Robinson. I love this team.
Scotty loves Jamie Benn. You heard it here first, boys.
Okay, well, that's not what anyone said.
Well, if you like the Dallas Stars, you got to like their captain.
I don't think that's how that works, and I think you know that, but you can get me in trouble with the fan base. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, the Dallas Stars, I feel like the Dallas Stars, and maybe this is just my internal bias, I think they're such a slept-on team nationally just because they're Dallas, right? They're not like, they're not Detroit, they're not Chicago. There's not the East Coast bias, right? I think they're a team that is super good. Jake Ottinger is insane.
Playoff Adi, baby.
Right. Like,
I know I say this every single time we play the Stars, but like, Jason Robertson's legitimately one of my favorite players in the entire NHL to watch. So yeah, like I don't know.
Not Jamie Benn?
No, still not. You can, no matter how many times you ask, the answer's still going to be no there. But
okay.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely a team that's a cup contender. They got a good young core there too.
Absolutely. You got Rupe Hintz as well, Miro Heiskanen. Yeah, they're a good hockey team. I think I agree with you. I think I could put them in Stanley Cup contender.
Well, then there you go.
As much as I don't want Jamie Benn to get a Stanley Cup ring, but
I also don't.
Okay. I'm sure. Any final thoughts, buddy? This is our
ball,
list.
baby.
We ball. Let us know if we're idiots. Let us know if you think that we're super geniuses. We got the comment section.
I don't think we're gonna get too many of the latter there, but
we'll get one comment. We'll get one person who's like, you know what? I'm gonna stroke their ego. They're super geniuses.
I don't think a single person is gonna say that.
Oh. So
can we wrap this up? We're at 41 minutes. Can we get out of here and go?
Yeah, I was wrapping it up, and then you rudely interrupted me.
You were staring at the ceiling, going, No part of that is wrapping it up, man. Let's go.
Any final thoughts?
I already said it. Thank you. Good night, San Diego. Golly.